Hello and welcome to Blackside, the podcast about for and by Black people in the UK. My name is Chukwudi and I am your host. Thank you, Nazine, for joining me on this episode of the Blackside podcast. Today we'll be talking about Black identity, being Black in the UK. But I think this is one of those topics that transcends geographical location. Well, who is Nazine to start with? So we'll get to know you.
Thank you for having me, Chukwudi. It's great to be on the podcast. So yes, I am Nazine. I am... where do I start? There's lots of things about me. I'm a Christian. I was born and raised in the UK, and I work as a midwife in the NHS. I am a newlywed, I would say. Got married a couple of months ago. So, yes, doing that bliss. That's a bit about me. Yeah.
All right. And I think since we'll be talking about Black identity, it may be relevant to say that you are Black or do you identify as Black?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Especially as we're talking about Black identity, what being Black means. What does being Black mean to you? The concept of being Black. What does that mean to you?
Being Black for me is it's layered. I'm Black-British, I would say. My heritage is the Caribbean. So my dad was born in Jamaica, and born and raised. And then my mum was born in the UK, but to Jamaican parents. So that's sort of my identity. But also for me being Black, it's very layered, because I think, belonging to a race that sort of historically has been really marginalized, oppressed, lots of brutalization and violence and things, going back to slavery sort of times, and actually being in the UK, being Black-British, I feel like still sort of living in the shadows of that almost. So it's very layered, because that affects how I sort of interact day to day, since growing up, and I suppose we can get more into that. But it's quite layered. Other thing to add as well, I did a DNA test not too long ago, to sort of find out the history, and I found out that I'm actually 62% Nigerian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on there. There's some parts of Togo as well, Cameroon. So, and which is interesting, because as far as I've always been told, we're Jamaican. We're Jamaican. That's it. So it's really enlightening, actually. So that's how I'd explain that question. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That, and when you say your identity being Black is layered, what do you mean? Can you talk more about that?
I think, it's important to say it's very different for different people. Obviously, as we know, Black people aren't a monolith with, complete different cultures, and, there's lots of things that make us who we are. And so for me, I say it's layered because it's unique to me. And I think through the years, having other conversations about identity with other Black British people, our answers are quite different, and we end up getting into mini debates as well. So that, I think that's why I'd say it's layered, in the sense of also being kind of Black British and that being my identity, but then with the Jamaican heritage, and then that plays a part in why it's laid for me, because you know, I feel like I'm not fully British, but I'm also not fully Jamaican, and so there's that kind of tug, I suppose. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that's a common theme with a lot of the people I've spoken with regarding what they think about Black identity. And I think it's, like you said, especially going through with the DNA test and then finding out like it's different cultures in one place. I think that definitely goes a long way in explaining the multi-layeredness of Blackness. I think I usually refrain from saying Black race as a race, because like I don't believe it's a race, it's an ethnic group rather than a race, but I think it's more common to say race and Black. So what are your thoughts, and what is Blackness as an identity important to you? Your ethnicity, being Caribbean, being Black British, all those cultures, and the multi-layeredness of those cultures and your identity. What is the importance of all of that to you?
So that's a good and big question again.
Sorry if I'm putting you on the hot seat.
No, it's okay. So yeah, I suppose being Black, Blackness is, or sort of speaks to a sort of collective experience, because like it said, there's so many different being Black doesn't actually say that much. I think it doesn't tell you that much about a person, even though it is a term I use myself. You can be Black Latina, Black African, Black Caribbean, that sort of thing. But saying that, I do think there is a unifying experience of Black people, and I suppose it does give you that sense of, or for me, there's a sense of togetherness, I suppose, because there's often a shared experience. Not always, but I think it's definitely, which might be surprising, or maybe this other people you've spoken to have a similar experience, but for me, it's definitely like an evolving journey, because of all the different layers and things that I'm discovering as well, because that was a recent discovery about sort of being, Nigerian, and for me, it's kind of led me on a sort of quest, because I want to find out my roots. So I'm kind of wanting to sort of find out my family tree, my history, and where that leads. So there's definitely an interplay there, because and then also being Black British, I identify a lot with the culture, and over the years I've sort of gone to Jamaica, and my dad's family, where he grew up and everything, and so but at the same time, going there, never really feeling like I fully fit in, but then also being Black British, growing up, you never really fit in. It's almost, there's a hybrid of cultures that come together, I suppose, which has made, that is all interplayed into my identity. Sort of growing up, I was one of the only Black girls in my class in my primary school, so that there was lots of things that I learned early on. As a child, you don't really have language for certain things, but I guess you sort of early on, you're shaken out of this sort of false sense of security that Black people are treated the same as everyone else. and again, that has an impact on your identity and who you are and how you see yourself. So I guess from my answer, you probably could tell that there's quite a lot going on there. There's a lot of
I think that's usually the case with situations where there's several. I mean, the idea of black, although it's usually in general society seen as the one big block of everyone in the box, but then when you see like you said, the multi-layered part of it with all the different cultures that make up all the different people, then you realize, okay, while we have shared experiences, we are also typically different in very different ways as well. And I think that difference is what it's in an argument I have heard recently, and it's that in the case of mixed ethnicity people, if they can't usually a mixed child, for example, will typically lean more to be black. It's usually considered black, and the argument is, if they can't be considered white, why would they be considered black? And on one hand, I'd have to say that sounds like gatekeeping the black community. But on the other hand, it is a valid argument to have, I think. So what do you think about that? Is it an exclusionary way of seeing things, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it is an exclusionary way of seeing things. Because I think because identity, like I was saying, is very personal to everyone, and there's so many things that make up your identity. I think your experiences, how you experience the world, how the world then also experiences you, and so I think I can. I've often heard mixed ethnicity people referring to themselves as one race, the other, in the case of being black or white, saying that they're black. I've definitely heard that. But I think it is very layered. I think also in society, a lot of the mixed ethnicity people are still at face similar disadvantages of black people. So again, I think that feeds into why one could see themselves as, like, why one would identify as being black, because that's your lived experience. And it is definitely something I've thought about, even had conversations with my husband during our dating phase, because he is white, and with my experience growing up in Black-British, I know that the experience, the treatment isn't the same, and it won't be the same as when you're white. And so we had some honest conversations about that, what that would look like, and also having to have those conversations with mixed race children about both ethnicities, histories. I don't think it's I think it is good to sort of discuss those things and not kind of shy away from them, because it all adds to identity, really. Personally, I think it's exclusionary to say you can't call yourself black and things like that, because like I said, it's well how the world perceives mixed race people, to be honest, often, and maybe how they perceive themselves. But yeah, so I can only imagine. Oftentimes, I sometimes feel this, like I mentioned before, this kind of struggle of feeling like, okay, too British when I'm in Jamaica, or the vice versa, that kind of thing. And then I feel, and then often we've been speaking to my mixed race friends, family as well, got some mixed race family, who feel that even more in that sense. So that'll be my my thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense though. Okay. Speaking about you being Black British, and then moving back to, or going to visit Jamaica, and then feeling that you're not Caribbean enough when you're back home. I shouldn't say back home, because then I think different people have different places they call home. So I'm not sure where that is for you, or if it's both of that. But what's your perspective on? I think then it's how your identity is shaped, basically. So what would you say? What are your thoughts on the factors that shape those identities and how we see ourselves, basically? And how do those factors play into your identity? For example, you being Black British and living in the UK, being born in the UK, and then you add factors like where you live in the UK, your financial status. I think it was in one of the conversations we've had about the role of, instead of it just being a racial issue, there's also the issue of class. So how do those factors play into your ethnic racial identity?
Wow, that's a big question, but good. I like these discussions. Yeah, I think all of those really factor in massively, really, because it's kind of the lens through which you see the world. So so for me, like I said, those lenses have been shaped by so many things. So I'm trying to think, where do I even start? So my family, my parents were married. They sort of owned their own home growing up. Although, I mean, class is interesting, definitely an interesting topic of discussion, and often I'm not really settled on this, but I suppose it's that thing of when you're a child, you sort of never see any struggle because your parents, they kind of hide it from you. Oftentimes they do very well. So my mum was a nurse, my dad was a builder growing up, but grew up in southeast London. Not that, it's quite rough. But we actually got into a good school. So those are a lot of things that shaped my context. When I was growing up very early on, we went to a church that was, I was going to say Caribbean, but honestly predominantly Jamaican. So that was kind of, my early socialization, even before school. That I think I was dedicated there when I was 2 weeks old. So and that was, I was, grew up as a Christian, but also culturally it was like completely Jamaican. Going back to see family in Jamaica. You mentioned about sort of home, and funny enough, I wouldn't consider Jamaica home. I wouldn't consider Jamaica home, just because whenever I did visit, it was only ever like maybe 3 weeks as a max at a time. And it wasn't always every summer as well either. It was now and again. So for me, it's definitely, I would say I'm the Black British Caribbean. That's my my identity, and actually I've wrestled with that a lot. sorry, again, another tangent, but
Yeah, it's all right,
I've wrestled with that. That kind of sometimes I've thought, like spoken to other people, other friends, and they were like maybe born in Jamaica, so they could have that. They could say, oh, I'm Jamaican, like whereas growing up, if I'd ever say I was Jamaican, people would be like, oh no, but you were born here though, and I'd be like, yeah, but, and then it's like, oh yeah, I was. So what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my identity? Not ever really feeling fully like settled on one, I think also some other friends who have grown up Black British, maybe Black African, have had a strong sense of identity in where their families are from. That there's that real sense of, if it's Nigeria, Nigerian, even though they're
strong
Black
connection.
British. Yeah. So, whereas for me, it's not like that. Even though, I'm Black British. But anyway, going off on a tangent. So
it's not a tangent. It's fine.
Yeah. So,
but I think I get what you're saying. It's like it's like you said, when there's no. I think it kind of relates to a lot of the conversations we've had so far. With people saying, like, for example, Black History Month to be more relevant to Black British people, kids who don't have a strong direct connection to their home being like where their parents are originally from, like second, third generation Black British people here. I think that's what you mean. Like it's like these other factors do shape your identity, because like it's no longer you just being Black, it's not you just being Caribbean, it's you being Black British, or like you said, Black British Caribbean. So it's all of that has to be factored into your identity.
Yes, yeah. And then you're adding the layer of kind of like the context as well, or where you're growing up. So in this Jamaican church, that was my origins, and massively shaped how I saw even Christianity and the world, and how I interacted with the world. And so I think that's why I say, or I think I started off by saying, its identity is very unique to each individual, even though we can all be Black, but it doesn't really mean very much just saying you're Black, because there's just so much else there, which is, I'm grateful for podcasts like these, because it really highlights that,
Thanks, by the way.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think in all of that, where you grew up and class being a factor in your identity, that kind of signals the importance of basically, I think, your community, the place, your environment, basically, where you grew up. What would you say, or rather, how much of what is happening? Okay, I think I'll put it in this context. When you see the news and something happens, you're always thinking, first thing is, let it not be a Black person that did that. Let it not be a Black person that did that. And then I think that goes a long way in saying, okay, your community kind of influences your identity as well. How much of what happens in the local community to other Black people in the UK, in the world, for example, even the George Floyd murder a couple of years ago, how much of all of that, what happens in the community, affects your identity?
Yeah, definitely. Such a good question, but also, hard question, but really, really, really true. So, just to touch on part of what you were saying there, like that kind of thing when you're like, oh my gosh, there not be a black person that done that. There not be a black person that done that. You know, it's sad as well, because I think often black people recognise that if it is, it's almost like one black person is then painted. It's almost like you're representing, black people represent other black people everywhere. I mean, I think in the UK it's like 4% of the UK population is black, but it's very concentrated, obviously, in sort of cities. So there's not a lot of us in the grand scheme of things, and so, but it is often been the experience of then when something happens with one black person, or if a black person is perpetrating something, you know, you always feel like this collective sense of like, it's all of us in this, you know, and then we're all going to be affected by it because, you know, I mean, even, there are various things, certain things happen in the world, and then there's a spike in, you know, racial aggravation to, you know, people experiencing racism and things like that. So it's tough. But for your other part of your question, I think, massively impacted by things around the world that happen to other black people. And I think I find it is hard to separate yourself from the cruelty of other people who have gone before us, you know, like you mentioned George Floyd, and like, you know, even, you know, historically, I think this has been, you know, an issue for centuries, and it's still going on. And I think, you know, it really affects me because it's almost like, I think, what if me or someone I know personally is next? That always seems to run through my mind whenever there's an atrocity happening with black people. There's a psychologist as well called Monica Williams, and she studies the link between racism and PTSD, and she speaks about something called vicarious trauma, where you sort of essentially indirectly experience racism that someone witnesses through the media, for example, social media, storytelling, or whatever it may be. It causes psychological trauma, and I think that's definitely how I relate when things happen, atrocities happen to other black people. I definitely experience it vicariously, I'd say. And even when it comes to learning about, kind of the past 400 years of black history, and where, you know, and that, looking at the 12.5 million slaves that are transported in the transatlantic slave trade, you know, it almost, I don't know, for some reason it always seems to come back to that. It's almost like you're reliving that, that sense of, there's a sense of injustice, there's a sense of, you know, injustice that really needs to be addressed, you know, and I think it hurts a lot because it seems like the world often doesn't really care, to be honest. And so, even when things happen, because I have had friends who, I mean, are really confused when, you know, even when the situation with George Floyd happened, the fact that it was in the US, you know, people saying, oh, well, you know, that was in America, like, why are you bothered? Why does that impact your life in any way? And I think it often, there's this sense of like, oh, racism is America's problem. Definitely, but actually, you know, I think it's a complete lack of education. It's a complete miseducation because, you know, Britain had its part to play and was very, very good at it, you know, very powerful, one of the most powerful in terms of when we're talking about slavery. And those, you know, those don't just go away overnight just because slavery is abolished. So injustices still happen, even with the situation with George Floyd. But other cases in here in England, Joy Gardner, and just thinking of trying to think of cases in the UK. But people, I don't know, they don't, for whatever reason, just think it's not an issue here. The other thing I wanted to mention as well was there's something called 5 times more, which is the campaign to it was about maternal outcomes in childbirth, and it was some years ago now that it was Black women were 5 times more likely to die during childbirth.
5 times more.
And 5 times more likely. The most recent, sorry, I can't say the years, but the most recent, it was found to be 4 times more likely. But there was some debate over it's not improved really. Is in statistically, Black women are still at the most disadvantaged. You have got mixed ethnicity women as well at a similar disadvantage. It wasn't 4 times more likely, but it was similar. So you've got these stats that present day. These things yes, it's not happening to me directly, because I'm not, pregnant or going through childbirth. Yes, it's the industry I work in, so there's that as well. I've got a part to play, being a voice, but these, just hearing about these things, recently I was listening to the news, and it was saying that sort of Black people, in terms of mental health services, is disproportionately discriminating against Black people. And sometimes I just think I'm living in some sort of dystopian universe where this is is this really present day? Is this really happening? But there seems to be a lot of things that it just sort of gets swept under the rug. It's just so and just to kind of sum it all up, there's a historian and speaker called Jamal Tisby, and he sort of speaks. There's a quote that he says that Black people respond so passionately to racism because we know that the logical end to white supremacy is Black death, and in all these cases, being Black women being 4 times more likely to die during childbirth. There's mental health services, and even if we think of COVID-19, that was disproportionately affecting Black people. All of these things. It's hard not to separate yourself from them and not to feel them, whether it happens in the UK or abroad, because that we're not. Yes, we have come a long way, but we're just so not where we need to be in terms of equality. In education, healthcare, just so many areas. So
something you said earlier, you talked about how the British were part of the entire process of slavery, how they had a hand in it, and basically we still know how bad the situation is. You just talked about the 5 times more. So considering all of these issues, even in society that we're in currently, how do you feel, or what are your thoughts about patriotism, nationalism, being Black British in a society that technically doesn't really like you being around? Maybe they don't not like you being around, but you feel the you're not always welcome, basically. So I think, considering that, being Black British and the role the British has had in all the issues affecting Black people, how do you feel? How do you balance your thoughts about those?
Again, kind of an ever evolving journey, really, of there's just a lot really with it, because I'm you know, I'm happy and proud to be Black British. You know, there's lots of advantages, you know, in or benefits, I suppose, it's afforded me in life, and you know, yeah, my heritage as well, being Jamaican. You know, it's all the things that make me. So, you know, I love that. But yes, at the same time, you know, when you're kind of discovering kind of the, you know, how Britain had such a hand in all these atrocities in the world, it is difficult. But I mean, if I'm asking how I balance that, it's a lot of education, kind of research, and kind of a lot of reading. There's a book that I haven't finished reading by Afro, British, right. Which kind of speaks on being British, but kind of not really. That sort of feeling in it, and it definitely resonate a lot with a lot that is she speaks about in that book. Even as Black Brits, we've had such a hand in Britain, you know, in where it is today. So there is a sense of it's all of our history, you know. And that's why I think it is so important for history to be taught in a non-biased way, because actually this is history. You know, this is how it is. And actually, I think that would massively help other Black British children growing up to really see themselves in Britain, because we've been there all along. You know, well before Windrush, that sort of, you know, Black Caribbeans, you know, coming in that sort of era of the 50s, 40s, you know, yeah, there've been Black people in the UK since the 18th century, really. So, but it's through learning about stuff like that that helps me to see myself in history, in Britain's history, and helps with that feeling of like being a kind of nomad, of not really fitting in. But again, like I say, it's ever-evolving journey of discovery. But it is, you know, it's my history. It's part of what makes me, and so it's something that I can't shy away from, because that only leads to, when you don't know who you are, it just affects so much and really impacts you and limits you, I think. So, and for me, how I see that is, it's not just me present day, you know, what I'm experiencing now. For me, that looks like a journey of discovery of how did I get here, and what are all those things that meant that I could be here today, speaking to you, sort of thing. So I try to take a holistic look at it, and it's not pretty and it's not nice. But again, there are so many things about me, you know, I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change that I was, you know, born in the 90s in Lewisham, and in Jamaican family, but in Britain, you know, those sort of things. But I
hope that's helpful to people listening who need to hear or want to hear or are interested in hearing about those experiences. I think to round up, anything you want to add to summarize everything we've talked about today? Anything? It's not necessary, but like, if you have anything you want people to know.
Not really that comes to mind, but I would just say, you know, not to shy away from history and learning about where you come from, and Black history and Britain's part in that. And you know, I recognise there's definitely nuance, and when I'm having these conversations with other Black friends and stuff, sometimes there is a bit of a debate of like, oh, you know, why do we need to talk about slavery, or why do, you know, it just keeps bringing up the past just reminds us of, you know, where we could have, you know, where we were, and, you know, not where we are now. But I mean, for me, and this is all, you know, all of these thoughts and everything are my own. It doesn't need to be anyone else's, but definitely I think we can't move on to a better future for us all without kind of bringing to light the past, and all what that means, and all what that means, basically. So that's what I would say. Have those discussions, go to those classes and read those books. And it helps you to feel more equipped and more settled, basically, who you are. So
All right. Thanks, Nadine, for joining us on this episode. It was really good to talk to you today.
Oh, great. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Ruby.
This episode was produced by me, Chukwudibara, and our guest was Nazine. The theme music is Afro Sax Freakout by John Bartman. Subscribe to the Blackside podcast on your favorite podcast platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and follow blackside.uk on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, or LinkedIn. Thank you for listening, and catch you on the next episode. Thank you.